Welcome to Crimepedia. I am your host. My name is Morgan. I hope you are having a wonderful day. With me, as always, is the lovely Cherry. Hello, Cherry. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us this week again for the second part of Morgan's story. So get yourself a cup of tea, whack your feet up on a stool, and get ready for this.
That's right. You might be asking, well, I heard you last week. Why am I hearing you again? That's because I'm a horrible human being and I left you with a cliffhanger.
You did, yeah. Everyone's gone, no, at the end of that episode. So, yeah, now we're going to make everybody's day and sew everything up into a nice little bundle, hopefully.
Yeah. So how about quickly I just do a recap? Well, first off, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, make sure you go back and listen to last week's first. What was that? I think that was episode 140, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And that was that was in regards to Leona Roberts. So if you have not listened to that episode, stop now, go back, listen to that episode now, then come back here. For those of you that did listen to last week and you are now here on part 2, let me give you a quick little recap. So Leona Roberts was a 16-year-old girl who, after work, this was December, now I got to remember the date off the top of my head, December 10th, 1969.
Yeah.
Okay. She left work in Pleasant Hill, California, and she went to her boyfriend's new apartment in Rodeo, California. When the boyfriend returned from his work, he returned home about 7 p.m. He found the living room in a mess. The Christmas tree was knocked over.
Like she had something on the sofa, didn't she? There was some of her items of clothing on the sofa.
Yeah, she was in beauty school, and so her smock and name tag were on the sofa. A pair of his pants were on the sofa,
and the rug
was pulled up and kind of like crumpled up a little bit. So we learned about her. We find out actually probably, what was it, 18 days later, roughly, her body was found off of Bolinas Lagoon, which is right on the Pacific Ocean, north of San Francisco, and her killer is still at large. I think from the first episode, most people are probably thinking, okay, probably the boyfriend, or maybe one of the other guys that she's seen.
Yeah, the guy, or maybe the guy, somebody else she was seeing, or it could have been the guy that lived in the boyfriend's house beforehand, because he had a similar vehicle or something, didn't he? So that was quite, I don't know. I'm not kidding. I don't think it was the boyfriend. I don't know why, but I just don't think it was the boyfriend.
Well, after this episode, which we're about to get into, maybe your thoughts on who it could have been are going to completely change. So let's hop into this week's episode.
Okay.
Initially, it seemed as though the murder of Leona Roberts could possibly have been carried out by someone close to her. However, the perspective of law enforcement shifted significantly due to the abductions and the killings of 2 other teenage girls in the area. This series of events raised questions. Could these incidents have been the work of a single individual? Or was this the case of copycats taking advantage of the situation? This is Crimepedia, and this is The Devil in Contra Costa. All right, Cherry. On December 1st, 1969, so this is 8 days before the disappearance of Leona Roberts, a 17-year-old senior at Pleasant Hill High School disappeared from her home at 158 Pioneer Avenue in Walnut Creek.
Okay.
Her name was Elaine Davis. And earlier that day, her and her mother, Gretchen, had spent the evening shopping for Christmas before returning home at approximately 10 p.m. At 10:30 p.m., Gretchen would leave to pick up her husband, James, from work in Concord, leaving Elaine and her 3-year-old sister, Heidi, at home. When Gretchen and James returned home about 45 minutes later, they discovered that Elaine was gone. While there were no signs of a struggle in the home, both parents were obviously concerned. Now, they found it very difficult to believe that Elaine would voluntarily leave the house, especially with her sister asleep in bed. Now, adding to their concern was the discovery of Elaine's glasses and purse containing $4, which were left behind in the house. So Elaine was nearsighted.
Right.
So she wouldn't have been leaving the house without her glasses to begin with. So that was obviously something was wrong. Now, her parents would describe Elaine as being shy and had no boyfriend or relationship issues at the time of her disappearance. James would later state that he believed that someone had their eyes on her for a long time and finally had their chance to grab her.
What a weird thing to say.
Very weird.
That's a strange thing. Yeah, that's a really strange thing to say, because surely if you've got thoughts that somebody's got their eye on her, you would have said something beforehand.
Right.
So it's a weird thing to say.
It is very weird. Now, he would admit that Elaine would have shared any concerns that she had with him, and that she had never been mentioned being trailed or stalked by anybody. But just prior to her disappearance, the family had their phone line disconnected because of numerous obscene phone calls that they had been receiving.
Oh, no.
So someone obviously had been calling the home, we don't know the actual verbiage being used, but obviously they're saying they're very obscene. So if it's to the point where they have to get their phone line disconnected, it's probably a lot of phone calls are receiving.
Yeah, it's probably bad.
Really disturbing.
Yeah.
No.
Do we know if those phone calls are aimed at her, or are they just nuisance phone calls to the house in general?
We don't know. I think that would make a difference. If they were aimed. No, obviously we don't know if they're aimed directly at her.
Okay.
But I'm believing that this is one of the reasons why her father, James, thought that someone had been targeting her. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were directed towards her. But it also might be one of those things where they're just getting a kick out of upsetting people. So it might
being assholes.
It might be towards mom. It might be towards Elaine. Just whoever's picking up the phone, they're just harassing them. Now, neighbors were described seeing several strange vehicles in the vicinity of the home in the days prior, including a blue Volkswagen. But they state that they had seen nothing the night of Elaine's disappearance. Now, while police investigators would not officially classify Elaine as being a victim of a kidnapping, they would investigate it as though she had been.
That's great. So, that's good.
Yes. I mean, it's usually the opposite. It's like, we don't know she's been kidnapped. She's 17 years old. She could have run off by herself. And, but they looked at it as like, this is a kidnapping.
Good.
Something happened in this home. Now, they believe that she had been abducted from the rear sliding glass door to the home. Police would have very little leads in the case until December 5th, when a brown loafer with a gold buckle was found on the Stone Valley Freeway ramp on Highway 680 in Alamo, roughly 6.5 miles south of the Davises' home. Gretchen would confirm that the shoe did belong to Elaine. And now, extensive search of the Danville and Alamo area would unearth no additional clues. Now, during the investigation, police would receive a tip from a Walnut Creek resident who lived 4 miles to the east of the Davis home on North Gate Road. They would tell investigators that their 17-year-old daughter had been stalked by a man described as being between 30 and 35 years old for nearly a week. On December 10th and 11th, the man followed the girl home from a school bus. She also received 2 disturbing phone calls from the man on December 13th, asking if her parents were home. Now, when she told the caller that her 19-year-old brother was home, which she did not have an older brother, those calls stopped. The following day, she was riding her horse in the front of her house when she saw the same man driving past in a small blue car. He later returned, stopped his car, but did not get out. On December 15th, the car drove past their home 3 times while her parents were out shopping. After the 3rd time, there was a knock at the door, and a man repeatedly said, "I know you are home alone. Can I use your phone? My car has broken down."
Weird.
Luckily, she did not let the man in, and he would eventually would leave. Now, after receiving this tip, police began to stake out the house, but the man never returned.
It's quite brazen for a man to do that in a neighborhood that much and that many times, and to the point where he's knocking on her door. That's quite a brazen thing to do. If that's the case, it's either very stupid or it's an escalation where he's done various little things before, and then now he's escalated to actually propositioning somebody, and seems strange.
Well, yeah. What allows him to be a little bit more brazen and things like this is, especially this home on Northgate Road is very, very secluded and very rural. So
and very large. She's riding her horse in the front yard. So it's got either it's a tiny little pony or she's got a massive front yard.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So it's very, so I think there's some safety he feels in doing it there.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Davis home, I think there's probably a little bit as well, because this is at the time it was a new build community. So while there were homes around, it wasn't what you would see now. So it's not like a complete full neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's plenty of open spots, open fields, open lots. So it's not like you're in a very, very busy neighborhood or packed neighborhood where people would easily be able to see you. Now, on December 16th, investigators would find a gold brass button in a vacant lot behind the Davis home.
Okay.
Now, it was believed to have come from Elaine's Navy-style peacoat, which she had been wearing the day of her kidnapping.
If you could just tell us what kind of coat is that, because I've never heard of those in England.
Oh.
Is it like a map or something?
No, so it's like a Navy peacoat. It's like a 3/4 length coat, so it probably goes down to, a lot of them would go down to like your upper thigh.
Okay.
It is usually, it's a collared coat.
Okay.
And it would have usually 3 or 4 buttons on one side. So when you
when you cross it over,
so when you
it would
close it,
yeah, I see.
So so you would have, they come in different styles. So one of them would have like 2 sets of buttons.
Yeah.
And so you would pull it over all the way across your like abdomen and button it, and then you'd have a second set of buttons like in the middle.
Right, I see. Yep, I know what you mean. Thank you.
Yeah. So on that evening, she actually, her plan while her mom was gone was to actually sew one of the buttons back on to this coat. So it's believed that button that they found was the one that she was planning on sewing back on.
Bless her. Yeah.
Now, 2 days later, a San Jose woman would contact the police stating that she had found, once again, a Navy-style peacoat on a remote stretch of Highway 17, northbound between San Jose and Santa Cruz. Now, she actually found the coat on December 3rd, 2 days after the kidnapping. But not knowing its possible connection to the Elaine Davis case, she ended up taking the coat to be dry cleaned, which seemingly would have gotten rid of any potential forensic evidence on it. Now, the button found on December 16th was matched to the other buttons on the coat, which proved that it was Elaine's coat. Not only that, they actually found the needle that Elaine was using to sew in the coat. So the needle was still there. So it was obviously her coat.
Yeah.
Now, police would state that they believe that the person responsible for her disappearance may have tossed the coat out of the car as they were returning to the Bay Area. So it seems like they might have been heading south, and at some point they were heading back north. All right. The following day, December 19th, the body of a young woman was found floating in the Pacific Ocean off of Lighthouse Point in Santa Cruz. The body had gone through heavy decomposition and was severely damaged. Santa Cruz sheriff deputies would report that the remains consisted only of a partial torso with arm bones and partial legs. So obviously, this had gone through severe decomposition.
Yeah.
It was in the ocean, so could it have been
Well, there's a
attacked
lot.
by
Yeah, that's right.
sharks or whatever? That's what
Yeah.
maybe I'm thinking. But so there wasn't a whole lot left.
Right.
Now, they would tell local newspapers at that time that there was nothing left to conduct fingerprint tests with or to even do blood tests. So there's really very little they can go off of to actually determining who this was. Now, based on the medical examiner's findings, it was determined that the age of the victim was somewhere between 20 and 25 years of age.
Oh, okay.
Because of this, investigators from both Santa Cruz County Sheriff and Walnut Creek Police Departments did not believe the victim could have been Elaine Davis. This victim would be classified as a Jane Doe and was buried in a cemetery for unidentified and impoverished persons. This ended up being a huge mistake on the part of the investigators. Okay. In 2000, a Walnut Creek police detective began reviewing the Elaine Davis case file. While searching databases for recovered unidentified persons, he would learn about the body recovered in Santa Cruz. The following year, with the help of the Santa Cruz coroner's office and a forensic anthropologist, authorities were able to locate the grave of this victim and exhume the body. Examination of dental records would confirm that the body was Elaine Davis.
It was her. Her poor family.
Mm-hmm.
That's awful.
No, it's
That's
absolutely
really
horrible.
Awful.
What makes this even sadder is 2 weeks after they identified her body, Elaine's mother, Gretchen, passed away herself.
It doesn't surprise me
almost
because
like
the
she
shot
was waiting.
We hear lots of cases where it's like this, where the parent of the deceased child or person ends up being in such a sad and awful position that they end up dying young. Loads of parents of this has happened. It's a huge toll it takes on a person to have to go through that, and for them to have her buried and then also exhumed and then find out that their daughter has been in a pauper's grave all this time. That's horrendous.
Oh, absolutely.
That's awful. That's awful.
Absolutely. And all it took was just one guy saying, "Oh, this body is a girl between the ages of 20 and 25." That's all it took. And once they said that, it can't be her.
It. No. So, that's awful.
All it took was them. All they had to do was to do a dental examination when they first found the body, and they would have been able to figure out
that family all of that. Yeah,
absolutely. Obviously, because of the prior deterioration of the body, now it's been buried now for,
of course,
30 years. Determining the cause of death at this point is basically impossible.
It's very difficult.
Investigators would note that the body did show some signs of cartilage damage in the neck, which could indicate that she may have been strangled.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, 3 months after the abduction and murders of Elaine Davis and Leona Roberts, unfortunately, a third teenage girl would go missing under similar circumstances.
So this is very strange now. This is the third teenage girl. Okay.
So it's a series of crimes, and they're all very similar. And there's little things that connect them. They are.
Okay. Right.
So I would say between Leona Roberts and Elaine Davis, they're probably within 10 miles of each other.
Wow.
Now, this victim, her name is Cosette Ellison, and she's a 15-year-old girl from Moraga who was abducted outside her home at 423 Canyon Road on March 3rd, 1970. Okay. At 3:20 p.m., Cosette was dropped off by her school bus driver, Eugene Yee, who reported seeing her cross the road and removing letters from the mailbox before heading along the driveway to her home. At that time, the bus driver noticed a man sitting in a pickup truck parked across the road from the Ellisons' gated driveway entrance. Approximately 10 minutes later, after dropping off his last students, Eugene Yee would pass by the Ellison home on his return trip. He would notice that the truck had moved and was now parked next to the driveway gate, but neither Cosette nor the man were seen. At 4 p.m., Cosette's parents returned home, but found Cosette missing. Her school books were not in their usual place, and no mail had been brought inside, suggesting that something had happened in the 10 minutes between the time Eugene Yee dropped her off and then drove past on his return trip. Eugene Yee would describe the man as being a well-built, clean-shaven, white male between the ages of 25 and 35, 5'10" to 6 feet tall, wearing a khaki-colored pilgrim-type hat with a rounded dome and a 3-inch rim. He was driving a green half-ton truck that was about 10 to 15 years old. So
wasn't there a truck in the first one?
It was a station wagon. I'm talking about Leona Roberts is a station wagon.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it was a station wagon, not a truck.
Now this one's a truck.
truck.
The hat is weird. It's weird to have it described as being like a pilgrim type hat. I don't know if you're familiar with what that would look like.
I think in my mind I know what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, so it has like a rounded, like the top is rounded, and then it has like the bill of the hat or the brim of the hat goes completely around it, and it's like flat.
Yeah.
It's how I describe it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
But to me that's a very weird hat to be wearing.
It is. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's very strange. In July 1970, hikers in the area of Mount Diablo, which is about a 40-minute drive northwest of the Ellison home, found articles of clothing along Morgan Territory Road and notified the sheriff's department. A search of the area would provide no additional clues, but these clothes would be collected and stored in an evidence locker. On January 1st, 1971, 2 men searching for old bottles along Morgan Territory Road came across the nude body of a female, partially buried in sand and gravel near Marsh Creek. The body was in an advanced stage of decomposition, and the left hand was missing. There were also several teeth missing from the victim, which made it impossible to identify the body through dental examination. So, in order to identify the body, investigators would send x-rays of the victim's fingers and forearm bones to a physical anthropologist in the Human Identification Laboratory at the University of Arizona.
Interesting how the previous girl was identified via dental records, and then the next victim has no teeth.
Right. Exactly.
So that sounds to me like an escalation. That sounds to me like this, if it's the same person, they're learning each sort of murder that they do, they're learning new things, and they're then trying those out on the next one.
No, yeah, you're right. And so I think It's interesting, and it's almost like either he's learning or this guy is getting very lucky. Because you remember, we go back to Leona Roberts, they're not able to identify her through fingerprints because of how bad the decomposition was. We have Elaine, who unfortunately really had nothing left of her. I mean, she had torso and like part of her arm. Now we have Cosette, who, the difference with her, you think about it, is she wasn't left in a body of water or near water. Now this is up in the
No.
hills or by Mount Diablo. So obviously the ocean's not gonna do its part in the decomposition. So yeah, I think you need to
Yeah.
take other steps to try to at least delay identification. I kind of think that he's just
Yeah.
getting really lucky at this point with
If it's the same person.
causing, if it is the same person. No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then I do find this interesting, this whole idea of they actually send these x-rays to a anthropologist to
Yeah.
identify it. And it's crazy that through the examination of these x-rays, they would able to positively identify the remains as Cosette Ellison. So just by looking at the bones, x-rays of the bones, they're like, yeah, that's her. Now, this identification would be confirmed when Cosette's mother would identify a slip found in July as having belonged to Cosette. Now, once again, because of the severity of decomposition, authorities were never able to determine the actual cause of death of Cosette Ellison.
Oh, that's sad.
So we have 3 here. Now, there are other crimes and murders that occurred around this time, a lot, which I'm not going to include because there are things about them which don't match up with these 3.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that throughout the 70s and early 80s, there were at least 5 serial killers who hunted in Costa Contra County. All right.
God,
If you were
5.
to expand this list to the greater Bay Area, this number would actually grow substantially. The list would include some names that you obviously know, such as Edmund Kemper, who was active. His first crimes were in the middle 60s, and he became active in the early 70s. You know the name Joseph D'Angelo, and you
Yeah.
know the name Zodiac.
Yeah.
We
Well,
we
they
know
do think
that
they were
Edmund.
that this is part of that.
It could be. Now, we know that Edmund Kemper would not have been able to kill either Elaine Davis or Leona Roberts since he was incarcerated at a state hospital in San Luis Obispo County, and he wouldn't be released until December 18th, 1969. So we know that he wasn't involved in that. But both Joseph D'Angelo and the Zodiac have been mentioned as possible suspects. Okay. Now, it's
Right.
my opinion that the evidence that points to either D'Angelo or Zodiac as being the perpetrator is somewhat weak, but it is nevertheless interesting. Now, for the Zodiac, there are some eerie coincidences that I will admit are intriguing. First, on the day that Leona Roberts went missing, a letter was sent to the Sacramento Bee, purportedly from Zodiac. Okay, so this letter was mailed in Sacramento on December 10th, same day Leona Roberts went missing or was abducted, sent to the Sacramento Bee. Now, the letter was a horoscope entitled Day by Day Forecast for Cancer. Pasted on top of the horoscope were the words Action Guide, Want, Zodiac, Watch, Hidden, Magic Amulet, FLT 555, and the phrase Birds Fly South. Okay. Now, Flight 555 is believed to be in reference to Flight 555, which was a weekly flight that flew from San Francisco to San Diego every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Now, Leona was abducted on a Wednesday, but it was prior to 7:30 p.m. in regards to watch, Leona did have a very unique or distinctive watch that she was wearing on the day that she was abducted, but this was never found. Finally, some people believe that Birds Fly South might be a reference to Balloonist Lagoon, where Leona was found, which is a major north-south Pacific flyway for migratory birds. Okay, so you're able to take some of these words and phrases that he has on this letter and like, okay, you can attach possible connections to Leona Roberts. I'll
I'm
admit
just
that
wondering whether it's because they're trying to attach stuff, whether this is, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, obviously. I mean,
trying to find a connection. Yeah.
You can find connections with a lot of different things. I mean, so it's interesting. Is it obvious that Zodiac was her killer? No, absolutely not. The following day, a second horoscope letter was mailed to the San Francisco newspaper printing company, which was titled Day by Day Forecast for Leo. Now, there are people out there that will say that this is a direct reference to Leona Roberts, since Leo, L-E-O, is the first letters of Leona, right? So Leona. I think this is a very, very long stretch here. So
I'm not sure about that.
I am not either. I will say that the most interesting thing, or the thing that makes me wonder, is that on January 4th, 1970, this is less than a month after Leona's abduction and murder, an 18-year-old woman named Peggy Traynor received a phone call from a man claiming to be the Zodiac. He would tell Peggy that she would be his next victim. Okay.
Did he do that?
He did not. But what's interesting is...
No, he didn't do that, did he? He didn't phone his victims beforehand.
No, he did. No, I don't. I think he probably... I think he made phone calls, but I don't think he called victims. But what's interesting is Peggy actually lived in the house directly behind Leona Roberts. And before this phone call was made, there was no link anywhere between Zodiac and her disappearance. So there wasn't like in the newspapers like, oh, did Zodiac kidnap this woman and kill her? So for the fact that someone just happened to call a woman, say, you're going to be my next victim, and she happened to live behind Leona, it is interesting. Could have been a prank by a friend who knew that she lived behind her. Was she talking to someone like, hey, I live right behind that woman that disappeared and was found dead? And now you have, some asshole friend who's like, I'm going to call and say I'm the Zodiac and, scare the shit out of her. Who, I don't know, but it is interesting. I see you're contemplating something.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. I think that it's like there are similarities in these. There are similarities in these, but I'm just thinking. I'm wondering if they're trying to get this link. They're trying to find a link to like the Zodiac and to because it doesn't sound like a Zodiac thing to me from what we know of him and what we know of his motives and his. It doesn't sound like that. No, and it doesn't sound like the kind of. The way that he carried out his crimes, it doesn't sound similar. And I'm wondering if they're kind of just like looking at what happened around the same time and then going, well, hey, look, he was doing this then. It could be, oh yeah, well, we found this. And it's like, well, okay, so a forecast of days of Leo, I don't know if that's, that could also be a star sign. That could be a completely different thing. Just so happens it's the first three letters of her name. I'm not 100% sure that, I'm not 100% sure. I think this might be that they're trying to make some kind of link, because because that would be the thing to do, because as humans we are like programmed to find patterns in things, which is why people argue that like when you look at when people look up at the sky after losing a loved one, they see clouds that are in the shape of an angel. It's because you're looking for something to resonate with you. that actually somebody who hasn't lost somebody might look up and they've just popped a tire on their car and that looks like a tire iron. It's just like, it's what's relevant to you. And I'm wondering if they're just looking at what happened around this time and trying to find something that makes these stay together and make them relevant to each other. I mean, each one wasn't exactly the same, carried out exactly the same way. We've got different ages. There's different vehicles being spotted. I'm just not sure that it's all one person.
No, it's possible. It's very possible. I think that at least two of them could be two of the things I talked
same
about
person.
could be linked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I talked about the tip that investigators received from the residents in Walnut Creek on Northgate Road. And the big thing from there was a man driving past in a small blue car. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you look at the disappearance of Elaine Davis, where neighbors describe seeing several vehicles in the area of the car, or in the area, one being a blue Volkswagen, which would be a small
blue car. Yeah, of course.
So I think those two seem to be connected, possibly
linked. Yeah.
But what's crazy is I think that you can also link that tip to the disappearance of Cassette Ellison, possibly.
Okay, how?
Which we'll get to. Well, okay. So the body of Elaine, or the body of Cassette Ellison, was found on Morgan Territory Road, which is near Mount Diablo.
Right.
The call tip came from the residents of Walnut Creek who lived on Northgate Road. Northgate Road actually goes into the foothills of Mount Diablo, so it is in the same area of
so it's
where
close. Yeah.
Cassette Ellison was found, which to me tells me like, okay, at least this person that they said had been stalking their daughter, and who, quite honestly, it's very similar to what we saw with Cassette Ellison, where it involved, he was following the school bus. This guy seems to have known that she was going to get off a school bus at this time, and the fact that it seems like that person was familiar with the area, it could obviously be related. So that I was obsessed with the Golden State Killer case before it was solved, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
obviously I have to say I am biased towards this because I do find it interesting, and I do think that there are some really eerie similarities between these cases and Joseph DeAngelo. Okay.
Or are you finding these because you're so obsessed with the Joseph DeAngelo case?
Well, we'll see. Maybe I'm finding them, but there are some things that are like, okay, that is a clear. I don't want to say connection, but that it's very similar, and it kind of goes, okay, could possibly be him. Yes. All right.
All right. Okay.
Now,
I'll reserve judgment until I hear all the facts.
So officially, okay, his first crimes as the Visalia ransacker occurred in March 1974, which obviously is 4 or 5 years prior to these events.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he did not commit any other crimes prior to 1974.
No, of course
all
not.
It says is that
no. Yeah.
There's no evidence, or there's not enough evidence that links him to some of these cases.
Yep, I agree.
So if we go back to 1969, I believe Joseph DeAngelo would have been about 24 years old. In August, he enrolled at Sierra College in Rocklin, California, which is northwest of Sacramento. So this would be about a 90-mile drive between Rocklin and the Walnut Creek area. So it is quite a bit of distance between the two.
It's an hour and a half. Yeah, maybe if you're doing 60, if you're doing 60 miles an hour, then yeah, if it's a straight road and you're on like a motorway or a freeway, whatever you guys call it, then yeah, there is the chance that he could easily be in that area within an hour and a half.
Yeah. Now, we do know that eventually he did commit crimes in these areas. So this is an area that he was familiar with. Okay. Now, between 1968 and 1970, there had been a cat burglar in the area of Walnut Creek. They actually were hitting houses in what's known as Sherman Acres. So the Sherman Acres neighborhood of Walnut Creek. The MO of this cat burglar was very similar to what we would associate Joseph DeAngelo having. Okay. And so these were things that he would do not only as a serial ransacker, but also as when he was the original Night Stalker and the East Area Rapist. Now, he was described at the time as being somewhere between 17 and 18 years old, which would be a little younger for what he actually was. But if you remember, when the original Night Stalker cases and even the Vassilio Ransacker cases were occurring, he was described as being a younger male. So I wouldn't like pass it off as saying, oh no, he's too young. This person was too young for it to be DeAngelo.
No, of course, no, I agree. I don't think you could pass that off as being too young. I think that's a sensible way to look at it.
Yeah. Now, this cat burglar would rummage through victims' wallets and purses while they slept, and would often stand over beds and watch children sleep, which is something that Joseph DeAngelo would do. He would watch victims, and he would watch them sleep. Now, eventually, this would lead to rape and obviously and murder at some point, but this is fairly early on, so maybe he hadn't got to that point yet. Now, one of the craziest things where I was like, well, as soon as I read this, I'm like, that does sound like him. So, at least one of these cat burglar cases in Sherman Acres, the suspect or the male who was assumed to be him was being pursued by police, and this man leapt over a 6-foot fence in the backyard to escape, which is something that Joseph DeAngelo was known to have done previously, where there were opportunities where police were able to capture him, but he seemingly was able to easily jump over these tall fences, no problem. So I saw that, I'm like, okay, that sounds like something Joseph DeAngelo could do or would do.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Now, so if this person was Joseph DeAngelo and it was in the Sherman Acres neighborhood, this would put him in the vicinity or the area close to Elaine Davis, so he wouldn't be familiar with the area. Now, Joseph DeAngelo actually did have family members in Concord, which was about a 10-minute drive from Sherman Acres. So Joseph DeAngelo was in the area. He was familiar with the area, and so this would be an area that he would be comfortable, stalking out.
Okay.
Now, you also have to remember one thing about Joseph DeAngelo was he loved to call victims, and he would love to call, and these would be absolutely obscene phone calls, right? So we have at least two of these cases that we discussed today where the perpetrator had called and was harassing victims and had left obscene not obscene he didn't leave obscene messages, but he was talking obscenely to them. Yeah. So this is something that Joseph DeAngelo was very fond of doing, and something that he did.
That's right.
Okay. Now these are all very like circumstantial, right? When you said it, like I'm taking these things and assigning them to Joseph DeAngelo because it's something that he would have done.
Yeah.
There is something that is very, very interesting that you may not overlook as easily. Okay. Now remember in the Elaine Davis case, she was being stalked by a man in a blue Volkswagen.
Yeah.
We also had the report of the tip that came in from the parent of the girl who had been stalked by a man, and it was said that he had a
that was a small blue
small
car.
blue vehicle. Okay. What would you say if I told you that Joseph D'Angelo actually
Had
had
a small
a
blue
small
car.
blue Volkswagen? Okay. He, in fact, had
Interesting.
a Volkswagen. Now, one of the Golden State Killer murders was the double murder of Brian and Katie Majori. And now, in that case, prior to the murder, a man in a blue Volkswagen would sit outside of Katie's place of work and watch her for hours
Freak.
prior to the murder. So, is it possible that
Mm.
this was Joseph D'Angelo? At least in some of the cases, yeah, it's possible. That blue Volkswagen is something that I heard and my ears, perked up almost immediately. Like, oh, that sounds like Joseph D'Angelo. So, could it have been him? Possibly.
There's more. There's more to link him than there has been so far with the others. There's more to link
Yes.
him to those 2 or 3 crimes. Not
Mm-hmm.
all of them. I wouldn't link him to all of them, but
Yeah.
there's more to link him to those ones that were very close to each other. I would say
Now,
that's feasible.
if it was Joseph D'Angelo, the one thing that I would say would be very odd is the fact that there seemed to have been, if he did kill these 3 girls, there would have been a de-escalation of his attacks rather than an escalation from here,
An
right? So you would
escalation.
go
Yeah.
from the murder of 3 girls to the
Yeah.
Cecilia Ransacker, where he started out by breaking into homes, rummaging through drawers and running through, looking through women's undergarments. So
Weirdos.
is it possible that he would have done murders, then digressed to just breaking and entering and being a menace?
No,
Possibly, but it's very strange, though.
it's very unlikely. A de-escalation is very unlikely because
Mm-hmm.
we know from looking at previous cases and in general, the perpetrators tend to escalate, sometimes slowly, but de-escalations don't happen all that often. So unless there's a
No,
reason for it. I mean,
exactly.
did he have a child? Did he get married? Is there a de-escalation because he hasn't got the time? Has he changed jobs? I'd be interested to know what was going on. What was he doing in that time? Because say he had
Well,
moved jobs and he didn't have the time.
mm-hmm. Interesting you should mention that. So after the last abduction and murder, this was Cosette Ellison. That's when he had met Bonnie and got engaged to Bonnie.
Right.
So he got engaged, I believe it would have been May of 1970, which would have been 2 months after Cosette was abducted. So is it possible that he was with Bonnie and that kind of settled him down for a little bit, and then after their breakup,
that's right. Then he went
got
nuts
back.
again, didn't he?
He got nuts again. Yeah. Is it possible?
So
Maybe.
is this something that you found, or is this something that this has been discussed?
This has been discussed. Yeah. So I don't know if all 3 have been discussed with Joseph D'Angelo or linked to him, but there's some similarities between all 3, and the time frame and how they were abducted and killed it's very similar circumstances. So to me, these all 3 do feel like the same person. Now, with that said, I'm going to tell you about a third serial killer. Now, this is one that people may not have heard of, but I find him to be a very strong suspect for 2 reasons. Okay. Now, his name was Philip Joseph Hughes Jr., who was also known as the East Bay Strangler.
Oh, okay. I know who you mean.
At the time, he lived in Pleasanton, California, which is east of San Francisco, just north of San Jose. So about a 30-minute drive south of Walnut Creek.
Which is nothing. 30-minute drive is nothing.
No, not at all. In 1980, Philip Hughes was found guilty of murdering 3 women during the early to mid 70s. Okay. His victims included 19-year-old Maureen Field from Moraga in 1972. Moraga is where Cosette Ellison lived and where she was abducted from. Okay. He also was found guilty of murdering 15-year-old Lisa Beery from Oakland. That was in 1974. And then 25-year-old Letitia Fagot from Walnut Creek in 1975. Okay. Now, the initial 2 victims suffered from fatal stab wounds, while the latter endured a horrific ordeal involving strangulation, stabbing, rape, and a fatal beating with a hammer during a home invasion.
Okay.
Now, all 3 of these victims were dumped alongside public roads, which helped Hughes manage to evade suspicion for several years until his wife and accomplice, Suzanne Perrin, turned him into police into 1979. You heard me correct. His accomplice.
Accomplice and wife. So this is like a Myra Hindley, Ian Brady kind of scenario.
So she is known to have helped him in 2 of the murders. The last one, Letitia Fagot, was a co-worker of Susan's and someone who she had pinpointed as being a good potential victim.
Yeah, vulnerable person. Interesting.
Those types of cases just really, really freak me out. Whereas the husband and wife or husband and girlfriend, and I never liked those cases.
No.
Now, while the first one occurred in 1972, there is belief that Hughes may have committed many more crimes in the area dating back into the 1960s. Like I said, there are 2 things that make him a very interesting suspect. First is the fact that after killing Maureen Fields, he dumped her body on Morgan Territory Road.
Oh, okay.
Which is the same road.
The same road.
Not far from where Elaine Davis had been dumped.
Wow.
So is this a dumping area for him? I mean, obviously he knows the area and he's familiar with it. So is this a place that he decided to go back to again because he's comfortable with? It's very, very possible. Now, the second thing is, if you remember the description of the man that was seen sitting in the truck outside of Cosette Ellison's house.
Yeah.
The bus driver said that he was wearing a khaki-colored pilgrim-type hat.
Yeah.
Now, police would make a composite sketch based off of his description. Now, after Susan Perrin had turned in Philip Hughes, she would also provide police with a photograph of Hughes wearing a very similar looking hat that had been taken around the time of the murders. All right. Okay. If you were to look at this picture in the composite, there's obviously similarities, and you can see why people would think, "Oh, that's the same person." I just sent it to you, and I want you to tell me what you think.
Okay, I'm going to have a look. Yeah. It's very similar. His nose is very, he has a very pronounced nose. If you look at the actual picture of him, he has a very distinctive face. He's got a big, massive, broad grin. And when you look at the picture of the composite drawing, it's very similar.
The nose and the grin.
There's just no tash. But I mean, people can grow tashes quite easily, can't they?
Right, exactly.
I agree.
Hat is different.
Out of the hat is slightly different though, because if that person if he was to tip his chin forward, the hat would look exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's only because in one picture he's looking straight at you, and in the other picture he's looking slightly downwards. But if he was to have his face straight up and straight onto the camera, it would be very similar, because you would just see the brim of the hat, and it would be very similar to the composite drawing.
Right. No,
I mean, how common are these pilgrim hats? How common are they?
Oh, well, if it's an actual quote unquote pilgrim hat, not common. But what I think this guy is wearing, he's wearing more of like a bucket hat.
I was just about to say that here, I would call that a bucket hat. That would be what we would call it. But I wondered if it was like, that's just what we call it in England and that's what you call it over there. I wasn't sure if that was the thing. I mean, out of all the suspects that you've come up with, he seems to me to be the most likely from what you've said. I mean, I know that there were some similar things that Joseph D'Angelo did and said, and okay, I get that. But maybe the terrorizing phone calls had nothing to do with the abduction. Maybe they were just a coincidence that had happened, and then this girl is abducted. I think out of the 3 suspects, he is the most likely to be looking at his
at least one
where
of them.
he yeah, at least one.
If I were to guess, I would say he is most likely for the Cosette Ellison abduction
I
and murder.
agree. Yeah, I agree.
Right. So what throws it off is the other ones. Yeah, you have. So the first one. Let's go back. So the first one, Leona Roberts. They described it as a blue station wagon. I believe they called it.
Yeah.
So so yeah, not quite the same as a blue small Volkswagen or blue small car. But then you have the small car pop up. So
it could just be coincidental. This might not all matter. It might not
right.
all be. It might not all be about the same. It might not all be the same person. This could be that these other things that have happened, or these other people that have seen. That other car could have just been the station wagon. Could have been just a station wagon. Nothing to do with this whatsoever.
Right. I mean, it's very possible that it's 3 victims, 3 different men who did this. Because you got to remember that
2 of the victims were by one guy.
What exactly? Because the number of serial killers or killers in the area at this time is ridiculous.
There was loads of serial killers in the 70s. Loads.
Yeah. And is it possible that one saw an opportunity when after Leona was abducted and killed, and they're like, "Oh, this is my chance. There's someone else out there like me, and maybe they'll get pinned for both of them." But it's to have this happen. These 3 girls in such a short period of time is absolutely unfounded. It's just you don't hear about stuff like this now.
No, I think you'd have to. What you'd have to do with this is going to be one of those whiteboard moments. I think you'd have to list the facts about each girl on a board so that you'd able to physically look at the similarities and put them together. Because I think that you can find similarities in a lot of cases, as they're all from roughly the same area. They're all roughly around the same age. It's very similar MOs in all 3. So I think that you like I said earlier, as a human being, we tend to try and find patterns in things. I think I'm looking, just from what you've told me just in this episode, I'm more inclined to think that perhaps 2 of the girls were from the same perpetrator and the other girl was separate. Just so happens they were in the same area. Just listening to just listening to the similarities between them. And I think this guy I like more as a double murderer than as just a single murderer.
Yeah, Philip Hughes.
Yeah.
Now he is still alive. He's still incarcerated. Surprisingly,
shame.
He is up for parole in 2 years.
And he's how old?
Oh, how old is he? He is 75 years old.
I was going to say he must have been like 20s back then, so he's got to be at least like 65 now. So yeah,
he would have been about 21, 22 years old.
Yeah, so he looks like that in the picture. Murders. Yeah, he looks like that. Interesting. Maybe we could write to him in prison.
Just like, hey, just let us know what's going on.
No, just to see. I mean, prison does things to people. Prison does do things to people, and it would be interesting to reach out to him to say, hey, look, we've come across this, and you're obviously incarcerated for this, but we found this.
Right.
What say you, sir? What say you?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's like I said, like these are just 3 of the murders around this time, but there were many, many more. I couldn't imagine what it would have been like to live in this area at this time, and just constant fear and constant worry about what's going to happen, what could happen to you, and what could happen to your family.
Yeah, scary.
Really is. It really is.
So, that's a really interesting case. That was, one of those ones that I think it would be a rabbit hole case. I think once you start, there will be so many things to pull you into another scenario and another pattern to look into. So, it's really interesting. It's crazy, isn't it? It's just crazy. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, well, at the end of the show, we like to lighten everything up and we like to do something we like to call the dumb criminal.
Hey, criminal, use a dummy.
This criminal is a dummy. Now, this is from San Francisco. A thief was pedaling his bike up to a woman on the sidewalks, on the pavement. The woman she had an iPhone in her hand. She was chatting to some people with her. And he cycled past her, grabbed the iPhone and cycled off. Now, I know this is quite a common thing in cities. You get this quite a lot where the people will like ride up beside you on a push bike and then just grab your bag because they make a quick getaway. The problem is that the woman at the time was demonstrating the new iPhone's GPS tracking device. And so when the guy stole it, he's being GPS tracked all the way. So police were able to just follow the GPS signal and catch him. And obviously he was arrested for robbing that off of that woman. So what an idiot.
Oh no.
Stick to handbags, my love. Stick to getting handbags instead of iPhones.
Yes.
Stupid, man.
iPhones honestly are not the best things to be stealing because there's so many like security features with those phones that you're gonna get caught.
Yeah.
If you you probably won't even get to use it. So it's like, what's the point there, guy?
You don't have a chance to sell it on. But it happened. I mean, one of my daughter's friends, she was out clubbing. I think she was in Birmingham. She was out clubbing, and a homeless guy was walking past her and just grabbed her phone out of her hand and just took off with her phone.
Oh my God.
And then by the time they managed to, she saw him again with a group of friends and went up to him and said, "Look, hey, you've stolen my phone." And he was like, "No, I haven't." And eventually he had sold it on to like 2 different homeless people. They had sold on this phone. They managed to get it back, luckily. But yeah, it's just crazy. Crazy, insane. Brazen people.
Very brazen. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And in between now and next week, if you want to catch us, you can on our social media. You can catch us on Facebook. You can catch us on Instagram. Instagram is probably the best if you want an answer from us quickly because we use that more. And you can also join our Patreon if you want to speak to other nutty people that like to listen to our extra episodes because there's lots of nutty people on our Patreon. So yeah, you can do that. But in the meantime, if you would be so kind to leave us a 5-star review, we would very much appreciate it. And it would help keep our little podcast in the charts, which would be great. We'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And so for now, we will say goodbye and see you next week. Be nice.
And bye.